Hi, my name is Arjun, and today we'll be working through a 2017 AP Stats free response question. So first of all, let's read the question first. So it says, the manager of a local fast food restaurant is concerned about customers who ask for a water cup when placing an order, but fill the cup with a soft drink from the beverage fountain instead of filling the cup with water. The manager selected a random sample of 80 customers who asked for a water cup when placing an order and found that 23 of those customers filled the cup with a soft drink from the beverage fountain. Construct and interpret a 95% confidence interval for the proportion of all customers who, having asked for a water cup when placing an order, will fill the cup with a soft drink from the beverage fountain. There are three parts to every confidence interval. The first part is the conditions. The second part is the solving or like the calculations you need to do. And the final part is the conclusion. And the conclusion has to be a specific statement and has specific requirements we need to meet. For solving, we need to find the confidence interval, and the reason I put the quotes is because there's a specific confidence interval for each question. In this case, it's a 95% confidence interval. And there's three conditions. The first condition is the random condition. The second is the normal, and the third is the independence condition. The conclusion is basically a summary of your findings. The conclusion explains your answer in terms of what the problem is asking for. There are specific requirements for the conclusion we'll be going through later. Together, these three steps guide you through how to construct a confidence interval. So the question asks us to construct a 95% confidence interval. So first of all, we'll be checking the three conditions because that's the first step. The first condition is the random condition. Second condition is the normal condition, and the third condition is the independence condition. So when we check the random condition, we can see that we're given a random sample of 80 customers. So that's what we would write for a random condition. So we'd say, yes, it is given as a random sample of 80 customers. Remember, for each problem, in the random condition, you have to state exactly what it says in the problem, or else you'll lose points on the AP exam. The second condition is the normal condition. For the normal condition, we need to meet two criteria in order to assume normality. The first criteria is that n times p has to be greater than 10, and the second criteria is that n times 1 minus p has to be greater than 10, where n equals the total number of people in the sample population, and p equals the calculated sample probability. So we know that n equals 80, and so we can solve for 80 times 23 over 80, which is the calculated probability, and we can see that it's greater than 10. That's one check. And n is also 80 for the second inequality, except this time we have to subtract the probability from 1. And that would give us a total of 80 times 57 over 80, which would also be greater than 10. So that would also be a check. therefore we can assume normality because we met both conditions. In order to assume independence, we must make sure that 10 times the sample population is less than the total population. So we know 80 is the sample population. So in most cases, 10 times the sample population would be less than the total population. And that's true in most cases. So we can assume that the 10 times the sample population would be less than the total population. And therefore, we can assume independence. So the second step in the process is the calculation. So one quick note, proportions always use z-scores and means usually use t-scores. There's one area where means do not use t-scores, but other than that, usually means use t-scores and proportions use z-scores. That's the common standard. In this case, we would be using z-scores because we're asked to find an interval for proportions. So the formula for a one sample z confidence interval would be p hat plus or minus z score, the z score, multiplied by the square root of p hat times 1 minus p hat over n, where p hat's the calculated probability and n is the total number in the sample population. total number of people in the sample population. So we can see that p hat equals 23 over 80, because that's the calculated probability we want. And in this case, we would be using the graphing calculator to find this, because you are allowed a graphing calculator on the AP exam. And so 23 over 80 would be equal to 0.2875. And now we can plug that in. And we also need to find so we would navigate to the t-score chart actually instead of the z-score chart, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. So there's actually no such thing as like a z-score chart in stats, and we would actually need to navigate to a t-score chart. And at the bottom, you would see an infinity section. And within the infinity section, there would be a column for the 95% confidence interval. And if you find the value that corresponds to both of them, it is 1.960. So that would be the value. Okay, great. Now we have the z-score value, which is 1.960. And now we can plug it into our little formula up there. So we know p hat is 0.2875. So we can go ahead and put that in there. Plus or minus the z-score, which is 1.960, times the square root of 0.2875 times 1 minus 0.2875 over n, which is 80, because that's the total number of people in the sample population. So now, with the help of our graphing calculator, we can find the 95% confidence interval, which would contain the true population proportion. So now we have our 95% confidence interval, which means we can arrive at the conclusion. So the conclusion has to be structured in a specific way, and it has a lot of requirements. So this is an example of a conclusion I'm about to show you on the board. So I made a mistake. Above I said that it would be the true population mean, but it's actually the true population proportion, and I'll show you where I made that mistake. Exactly there. It should be proportion instead of mean. Sorry about that. So there we have it. That's our conclusion for this question.